that the prices that consumers pay are higher than they would be if those companies were not vertically integrated?
So my research on Medicare Part D...
Give me an answer.
Partially.
What do you mean partially? They're either higher or they're lower.
So,
There's no such thing. But why don't we skip the foreplay and go right to the sex and outlaw vertical integration for Part D? Would you accept an amendment to your bill like that?
I don't want to answer that question right now because I want to study that.
Would you support that, Mr. Scott? Let me just guess what your answer is.
Welcome back to Right View Nation, where the truth is raw, the facts are real, and we don't pull punches. If you're tired of being robbed blind by Big Pharma and their cronies in Washington, this is the video you need to see. Today, we're breaking down a moment that deserves to be carved into the marble halls of Congress. When Senator John Kennedy torched the corrupt pharmacy benefit mafia right there in the Senate. Now, folks, I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of watching unelected bureaucrats and mega-corporate vultures line their pockets while working-class Americans can't afford their prescriptions. And who do we have to thank for this mess? A cartel of 3 pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs, who control 80% of the market. Yes, you heard that right. 3 companies. That's not competition, that's corporate communism. Senator Kennedy looked this so-called expert dead in the eye and said, "Give me an answer." Not a lecture, not a TED Talk, not a spreadsheet, just a straight-up yes or a no. But like every academic soaked in think tank money, this guy started dancing like his paycheck depended on it. And let's be honest, IT does. Vertical integration. Now that's the key phrase here. These PBMs are not just middlemen. They're the gatekeepers, the price setters, the rebate hoarders. They're in bed with insurance companies, with pharmacies, and they're hiking up your premiums while playing both sides of the table.
Professor Sood, as I understand it, 80% of the PBM market is controlled by 3 companies, 3 PBMs, that are vertically integrated. Is that right?
that is correct.
Does your research show that the prices that consumers pay are higher than they would be if those companies were not vertically integrated?
So my research on Medicare Part D...
Give me an answer.
Partially.
What do you mean partially? They're either higher or they're lower.
So
There's no such thing as a partial price.
what I find is that Medicare Part D premiums are higher as a result of vertical integration.
Okay. Well, then why don't we, I'm all for transparency, Mr. Chairman, I want to say that. But why don't we skip the foreplay and go right to the sex and outlaw vertical integration for Part D? Would you accept an amendment to your bill like that?
I don't want to answer that question right now because I want to study that.
Would you support that, Mr. Scott? Let me just guess what your answer is.
No, sir, and I can explain why.
No, you speak Sanskrit. I mean, I'm sorry. You know, you're good at it, and I know your job is to protect the PBMs. And I might tell us I don't think PBMs are the only ones at fault, but you don't have unclean hands. Professor Sood, you say PBMs ought to be fiduciaries. To whom?
To both the plan and their members.
Well, what if the plan and the members' interests diverge? Who are they fiduciaries to?
Ultimately, in principle, they should be fiduciaries to the members.
Okay.
So, for example, ERISA makes...
I get it.
Okay.
I get it. Mr. Chairman, again, why don't we skip the foreplay and go right to the sex? Why don't we just amend your bill to require that PBMs have a fiduciary obligation to plan members?
Well, I think that's been suggested, and I think there's part of that in our legislation, but probably not fully enough to satisfy you.
Well,
So let me look at what you're want to add to it.
okay. I mean, I'm not criticizing your bill. I don't want my office to end up in Bethesda. So I'm not criticizing your bill. I like transparency. But we're just nibbling around the edges here. And with respect, Mr. Scott, your definition of a fiduciary is wrong. A fiduciary isn't somebody that controls the decision. You know that, and I know that. A fiduciary is somebody who has a legal obligation to give his client the best advice and to do what's best for his client. It doesn't replace agent with principal or vice versa. You know that, and I know that. Well, you need to talk to your lawyers. I may be wrong, but I doubt it. Let me go back to Professor Sood. Tell me 2 things you would do tomorrow to fix PBMs and result in lower prices for consumers.
So I think the 2 things I would do is...
Very specific.
Yes. I would implement price transparency so that everyone knows what they're paying. And
Okay, price transparency just tells us who's screwing up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the fiduciary responsibility says, if you're getting screwed, I can take you to court. So I would do those 2 things. And those are, I think, better than, banning particular practices, because otherwise it's whack-a-mole. You ban spread pricing and something else will show up a year from now.
I got 29 seconds. Do you have any other suggestions? I appreciate your
So
straight talk.
the other thing we can do is, what I recommended is pass-through of rebates to patients. So suppose a drug...
Say that again?
So pass-through of rebates to patients.
Uh-huh.
So for example, the list price of a drug is $50,000, but the rebate on the drug is $40,000. So when a patient is paying cost sharing, suppose 10%, they should be paying on the post-rebate price, so which is the $50,000 less the $40,000 rebate. Right now, what's happening is patients are paying cost sharing on the $50,000. So this would immediately lower patient out-of-pocket costs. So as Dr. Kircher said, for the cancer patients...
So you're saying the number after us, the PBMs are jacking up, are encouraging manufacturers to jack up the list price so they can jack up their rebates.
And that...
Is that right?
Yes.
That's illegal.
And the jacked up...
That's illegal.
Yes. I don't know about that, but it...
I do.
Okay.
It's illegal as hell.
Yeah.
Kennedy wasn't fooled for a second. He called it like it is. The system is rigged. And only Senator Kennedy could drop a line like that in the middle of a Senate hearing. That's what we love about him. No filter. No fluff. Just good OL Southern firepower aimed at the heart of Washington's corruption. And what was his solution? Cut through the bureaucratic red tape and outlaw this vertical integration in Medicare. That's what we call real reform, baby. Then comes Mr. Scott, probably fresh off a Zoom call with his PBM donors, saying, "No, sir. Of course not. Because the minute we shine sunlight on this crooked setup, the profit margins for these corporate parasites go down." So he mumbles, fumbles, and Kennedy flat out tells him, "You speak Sanskrit." Folks, that's DC code for, you talk a lot and say nothing. Let me break this down in plain English. PBMs are robbing you blind. They negotiate rebates from drug manufacturers, then turn around and pocket the savings instead of passing them to patients. You're paying 10% coinsurance on a drug with a list price of $50,000, but the real cost after rebates is $10,000. And guess what? You still pay based on the inflated price. Kennedy called that what it is, illegal as hell. And you know what? He's absolutely right. And when Kennedy asked Professor Sood how to fix this, the man actually had ideas. Real ones. First, price transparency, so we can see who's ripping us off. Second, fiduciary duty. Force PBMs to put the patient first. And third, rebate pass-throughs. If there's a discount, the patient should get it. Not Wall Street. Not some executive. The American people. And you better believe Kennedy knew the legal definition of fiduciary better than the lawyer representing the PBMs. A fiduciary has to act in the client's best interest. Period. Full stop. Not twist definitions. Not dance around duty. Not swap words like it's a law school debate. You either serve the people or you serve the profit machine. This is why elections matter. This is why it's not enough to rant on Facebook or tweet at the wind. We need bold, fearless fighters in Congress who will stand up to the pharmaceutical industrial complex. People like Senator Kennedy, who are not afraid to call the game and name the players. We're not just talking about healthcare here. We're talking about justice. We're talking about life and death. We're talking about whether a mom can afford chemo for her child or a granddad can get insulin without selling his pickup truck. If that doesn't make your blood boil, you're not paying attention. This is Right View Nation, and we are done being silent, done being passive, and done letting DC bureaucrats and corporate middlemen treat America like a pharmacy vending machine for their stockholders. Subscribe, comment, share this video like your freedom depends on it, because it does. We're building a movement, and it starts with telling the truth, loud and clear. God bless Senator Kennedy. God bless the American people. And God bless the United States of America. Stay loud. Stay proud. This is Right View Nation, where we don't back down.